These gentlemen reintroduce themselves. We'd like them to tell us their favorite fish, their best reef keeping memory, and what they would call their biggest reef keeping failure. Because we all like to know how we think, we feel like we're the only ones that mess up sometimes, and we know the professionals messed up too. Make us feel a little bit better. So we'll start with you, Matt.
All right, Matt Pedersen, currently senior editor for Corral and Amazonas Magazine. So favorite fish is the 4-eyed butterfly fish, Huynh capistratus. I made ornaments of them when I was a kid for the Christmas tree. Best reef keeping memory? I remember jumping up and down and screaming on the phone with Joe Lichtenberg, who was a clownfish breeder for 21 years when I had the Harlequin filefish spawn. Call him, oh my God, you won't believe what just happened, this is so cool! And then my worst disaster, well, I showed you one of my more embarrassing moments in my talk, but I actually recently said, oh, I can skip quarantine. I've got copper in this fish-only system anyways. The only thing I'm worried about is really cryptocaryon and ectoparasites. I've got copper in there. I can just put these fish in there and we'll be fine. And no one knows what came in with those fish. All the fish came in and died. And that proceeded to knock out most of the fish that were in the system with it. And we don't know if it was viral or bacterial. So yeah, I thought I was above reproach and could just wing it and just copper my system and I'd be fine. And, got a quarantine, so.
Dana Riddle, light junkie. Favorite fish that I've ever had was sorry?
Your favorite fish was coral.
Oh, coral? I can't do both. Yeah, I'm not much of a fish guy. I'm going to leave that up to Matt and anyone else. But favorite fish was a captive bred flame angel that I had. I kept it for years, and I supported the effort that were actually captive bred on the Big Island of Hawaii. And do you remember, was that Kona Blue that did that? Okay, I know Sid Krause was working with the tanks there. I don't remember exactly. Actually, Doug Robbins gave that fish to me.
A bunch of people together, all did it at the same time. It was a communal effort.
Oh, absolutely my favorite fish. I love that fish, and I came home, and I guess my worst moment was when I found that fish dead. I came home, and for no apparent reason, he was really out. Favorite coral? There have been so many. Anything that's colorful. I'll just make a general group. The ones I try to avoid right now, since I'm doing chlorophyll readings, the ones that are red have very low chlorophyll readings in them. So I think that they're probably my least favorite. I just can't get any data out of them. I think that does it. I'll pass it on to the true expert here and let him relay his experiences.
Paul Rogers, a hobbyist. My favorite fish ever was a porcupine puffer that I had until it was the size of a football in 750. And probably one of my favorite memories is associated with that fish when shortly around the time it got to the size of a football, apparently it developed enough of a brain and actually was able to distinguish not that the person was outside the tank, but me from other people. And I could demo by having people walk behind the tank and then swim over and look at you and whatever. And then I'd have them step away and then I'd walk behind the tank and it would spit water out of the tank. So, very personable tank. And then worst disaster, there's a lot to choose from, but probably the one that got me most popular at home was, I think I may have mentioned in my talk earlier, I had a point in time where I thought my 220-gallon salt mixing reservoir had something bad in it and I decided to clean it with bleach. The part of the story I didn't mention is that it's a big reservoir. I wanted to fill it with a lot of water, so I ran the garden hose from outside into the reservoir and watching it fill and mixing in the bleach, and then I got a call. And I left the room, and I left a garden hose running full tilt in what used to be a dining room with wooden floors. And I don't even know how many 100 gallons of water I dumped onto the wooden floors of the downstairs. So that was quite the accomplishment. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I'll pass it along.
My name is Gary Coffman. Coffman. I own the Austin Aquadome. Most of you guys know me. I thought I was just up here to be the pretty face. But if I got to say something, I've done thousands and thousands of fish. I don't know that I have a favorite. They all have some unique properties to all of them, freshwater and saltwater. My biggest disaster may have been getting the Austin Aquadome. No, it's been fun. I mean, it's a great community of people, and I don't personally own fish anymore because I have about 200 tanks to take care of on my own, but it's been fun, and I've enjoyed the people in the art club and dealing with them.
So now we want to open it up to you guys, and if you have any questions, oh man, see Tim Fish's hand in the air high. So if you have anything you'd like to ask the panel, feel free to stand up and shout. We'll leave the mic with them, and we'll just take turns and be civil, go one at a time.
And this is for all four of you, what is the biggest change that you've seen, or the most significant development that you've seen since you first started keeping saltwater tanks? Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest change, I mean, obviously the obvious answer for me is the fish breeding side of things, but if I stand back and look at it objectively, our ability to keep and culture coral has been a fundamental groundswell change to our hobby. From where we were when I started keeping marine fish with a 10-gallon tank and crushed coral with an underground filter, and to where we are now. Just the embracing of reef keeping in general has changed this hobby so immensely. That is by far the biggest change.
Did I pay you to say that? Something about good about corals? No. I think the most significant change I've seen, and I'll really date myself here, I started keeping marine fish in 1964. Then the silicone cements were just coming out, the oil glass aquariums were becoming available. Before that, if you wanted to keep saltwater, you had to take some sort of tar mastic and put on the metaframe tanks to keep them from corroding. And there was a slate bottom to it that had to be coated as well. So just the container to keep the saltwater, corroding and the metals and becoming toxic to the fish was an amazing advancement. And all of a sudden we could go to the glass shop and get some glass cut and start making our own aquariums. I started doing that when I was probably 11 years old, so I actually built my own aquariums. So I think that was a giant advancement for the hobby, just the container changing where we didn't have to worry about toxicity issues.
Along with those gentlemen, I started right as raw glass aquariums were coming onto the market, and it was a huge improvement. You could actually be successful. I think the next dramatic change was the arrival of live rock that allowed you to keep reef tanks in a stable environment. And then the biggest changes after that, I think, are foods, the variety of foods that you can eat. There were some fish that you had no chance of keeping. There still are a few, and that may be just because those foods haven't become available. So the feeding issues have improved a tremendous amount of keeping fish.
So a few of the others have occurred for me as well, these ideas here, just more specifically about the time I was getting into the hobby. Live rock was really becoming popular, and I loved the things that came with it, like the Florida-based live rock, gorilla crabs and all, critters on it, very, very interesting. And then just good timing, I think the GFO phosphate media came along in the early 90s and certainly helped me with nutrient and algae issues.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. For Matt, we spoke a little bit before, but if someone wants to really make a difference, start breeding something, what are some tips? How do we start, and where can we go from there?
Okay, so your question is, what's a good way to start breeding?
Yes.
All right, so the first thing I would do is not do clownfish, because everyone does clownfish. If we all produce the same thing, there's other things to do. Just got to do something other than clownfish. Just go in the vendor room and see all the clownfish. So Matt Whitbridge actually gave me this idea. This is Matt's idea. He recommends the Fang Blennies as an ideal first candidate group of fish to work with. And the Fang Blennies are nice because they breed rather quickly. If you get them in and you have males and females, you can have egg production within a couple of months, versus you buy a pair of clownfish, you might wait 3 years, 5 years for some of the species. So he looks at those as an ideal first fish. They're also pretty easy to rear. He's had a lot more experience with them than I have, but I've had moderate success so far. I was mentioning the green-banded goby. Any of the little gobies are nice because they're small. We were talking about space and time, and well, a 5.5 gallon tank can hold a pair of green-banded gobies. Have a 10-gallon tank for grow out. You won't take it and work with every hatch, but that's not the point. You're not trying to produce a ton of fish. Because if you produce a ton of fish, you have to sell a ton of fish. We just can't keep all the fish we produce. That's where we're different from coral propagators who can take a couple frags here or there, and it's not an overwhelming amount of animals. So that would be my suggestion, is just look at things that other people aren't doing in big quantities because they're easy. Of course, the banguys are a good candidate, but the problem with the bangui is you won't learn anything about how to do any other marine fish. Banguys are very unique in being direct developers. You'll only learn how to breed banguys. So that's where I was thinking Fang Blennies might be a great first choice. And then you can grow from there. I mean, you could have Fang Blennies and neon gobies in a tank together. You don't have to have your brood stock all in separate, isolated tanks. My biggest advice is don't grow too fast. Don't look at it with money in your eyes. Just do it because you like it and it's something new and different than that you have it already done. That answer your question? All right.
Are there lots of resources on those two fish on MBI?
There are lots of resources on yes, the internet is just, that's something that's really changed our hobby. Just the simple availability of information is just tremendous. And Fang Blennies, goby breeding, that's all just a Google search away. So MBI, of course, my breeding is recorded there, but I started putting stuff on Reef Central back in the mid-2000s, and just documenting in real time, this is what I was doing. So finding the information is easy. Get Matt Whitbridge's book, it's the current, most up to date. That's a really great source to just read the book first. Before you do anything else, just read it.
I'd like to make a comment on the internet resources. Be sure of your resource. Okay? Yeah. Make sure that you're talking to an expert, like some of these guys on the topic. There are a lot of people out there that are passing along information that they've heard, or they're mistaken in their interpretation. So, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge. Just be careful. Find somebody that's well respected, an expert, and don't listen to someone just regurgitating some garbage that they don't hear.
Other questions?
Anything at all?
All right, well, if there
One of the things that nobody's talked about a whole lot yet is system automation. Paul, you touched on it a little bit in your presentation. I know there's an article in Reef magazine the past couple issues about reef automation, but talk about your experience with different systems and what you prefer and how that's changed.
Sure, so I would not consider myself an expert on it. I think I'm setting up an expert complexity system right now, but previously I've had pretty light use of it. I just did the same research I think anyone does in terms of reading all the threads and opinions on Reef Central, and settled on Apex pretty quickly. It seemed to kind of emerge as the standard. I'm a programmer at heart, and it looked natural to me, so that's what I've gone with. The expandability is nice. I'm stretching the limits of that in terms of 250 feet of USB and the number of switch sensors it'll let you operate with, but in terms of the automation side, for me, the essentials are the top off, and then because speaking to my own weaknesses when it comes to husbandry, water change automation. That just ensures that it happens as consistently as it should. I'm not planning myself to go into super elaborate if-then emergency condition testing type of stuff. So there's some simple water alarms to let me know when water is and where it should be, light control. One thing I looked through the audience of the panel as well, speaking of lights, is I was wondering, haven't found in a quick search seasonal light pattern emulations for Apex. I don't know if those are out in open source, but I'd love to find one if someone's done a South Pacific variation of daytime patterns of light.
I can answer that. Look on Advanced Aquarius, that is something published a couple months ago about photo periods. And I think automation is going to be a big breakthrough if we're looking to spawn corals in captivity. Right now, most of the researchers are collecting the eggs from the wild. It's possible to do this. We hear of hobbyists having corals spawned in their aquariums, but no one's attempting to breed them apparently. Quick question, and this is related to light and automation. How many people believe that coral spawning is related to moonlight? Anybody? It's not. That's another rumor that gets started. You can predict the coral spawning by the lunar phase, but it's actually the photo period that it's, if you think about it, how do corals know when to spawn when they're in deep water? They can't even sense that weak moonlight. They can't sense the moonlight, but they can sense when it gets dark, and these photoreceptors that they have are able to time the photo period down to, the very day, the very hour, the very minute. So that's one thing, and I don't know if anybody, I have the same question, if anybody knows of a controller that can mimic the photo periods, seasonal photo periods without a lot of programming. I'd love to hear about it too. Any more questions? Another lighting question, I'd love it. I'd love to talk about this stuff.
How do you guys feel about invasive species issues as it relates to commercial areas?
Yeah, you're getting into some serious things, and it's going to be more and more serious as we go along. I mean, everybody here probably knows about Atlantic lionfish now, and their distinct advantage because of the way they catch prey. Apparently, it's not seen in the Atlantic prey, so they're not used to how lionfish actually feed. So they don't have very good defense mechanisms against it. It is a significant problem. Why that fish has found such a great breeding ground off the Atlantic coast, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows exactly how. You would probably be, but it just happened to be has happened to be very successful. Are there going to be many more marine species that do that? I don't think so. Not like you would see in freshwater. The breeding is different and things like that. And Matt could talk about breeding cycles of marine fish, and it's more complicated than it ever could be in freshwater. It just doesn't work quite as well. And some of these marine species, like gobies and that, don't live there. Their lifespans are very short. So you don't have this thing of generational problems. They don't get big. They don't cause problems. But you are going to see significant governmental pressures just because of the fear factors. And some of that's the hobby's fault, but not a lot of it. A lot of these things that are introduced invasive species do not come out of the fish hobby. They just don't. They come out of other industries. But we're an easy organization to blame. So some of that, but it's going to be trickier and trickier as governments proceed with legislation. Now, talk about breeding.
Let me say something. We need to define what invasive actually is. Living in a fragile ecosystem such as Hawaii, I can see a lot of knee-jerk reactions that we have. I can give you a couple of examples overall. Tabastria, which is not native to the Atlantic, is considered, it's a pretty non-photosynthetic coral, is considered invasive in the Atlantic because it's introduced. I don't know if it's actually causing any harm. And Matt can probably speak to this. The Vanguard gardenfish were found in a different area. And I've got an article at home that calls them invasive, even though they're considered endangered or threatened. So we really need to look at, there again, consider your source. Is it really invasive, or is it just a natural change? Yes. Yeah. In Hawaii, there are some algae that are considered invasive. But the root of the problem is actually pollution from the pineapple plantations and some of the sewage treatment plants. And they don't have the nutrient control that they have there. So it's a complex issue, but if someone says it's invasive, there again, consider your source and research.
So how many people here think that Royal Brahmas are native to Florida? They're not. They were introduced there by fish collectors who wanted them closer. They're not from Florida. They're from further down in the Caribbean. We as humans have this crazy thing where we like to screw around with nature an awful lot. You know, I live on one of the Great Lakes, and the big fishery that I like to fish for is rainbow trout that aren't native there. Naturalized. The native species have long been driven out before I was ever born. You know, the coaster brook trout is basically an endangered species. It's not there anymore. And we have Pacific pink salmon that were introduced in the 50s from a hatchery where they basically put it on the drain, didn't think anything of it. Now we have feral populations of pink salmon, and the fishermen refer to them as the rats of Lake Superior because they show up just in massive quantities every fall, just filling our rivers with little salmon like this that no one wants to eat or catch. We screw things up all the time. The bangays in Lemba are considered invasive and detrimental because they're pushing out the native fish. Yet, where they come from, they're probably being harvested. There could be other things, but the blame on the bangay is generally pointed at the aquarium trade. I mean, there are so many non-native fish around, and yeah, the damage can be either minimal or it can be extensive. So how do I feel about it? Obviously, it's a problem for us. It's a PR problem, especially when if you look at all the different non-native fish that have been found just in Florida. The Everglades are an aquarium, you know, with fish from South America and Asia, and you name it. I was fishing for peacock bass and tiger oscar in Miami, you know, with iguanas running around. So it's a problem. The concern and what happens because of problems like that is we get laws that are overreaching. I understand the Florida lionfish ban that's being proposed. It's a little bit of too little too late and not understanding the problem. There's no point to ban lionfish at this point. They're not going anywhere. If they ever want to get lionfish out of the Atlantic, it's going to require an international effort to ever do that. We've proven ourselves as a species to have the ability to wipe out any species we really want to through just simple overconsumption. Lionfish is going to really push that whether we can really live up to that goal. Whether we to overconsume it and wipe it to the brink of extinction in the Atlantic. But I mean, you know, things like starlings are not native to North America. Brown trout are from Germany. We have modified our natural systems in ways that go way far beyond, way earlier than any of us. That doesn't mean we're off the hook. I think we're smarter and more enlightened now. So my big problem, getting back to the legal issue, is the knee-jerk reactions where we look at something like HR 996 or 699, where I think it's 669, where they were trying to basically put a white list of non-invasive fish that people could keep in their aquariums. And on that list were goldfish, which are one of the most easily invasive freshwater fish we all keep. But they were okay to keep as an aquarist. But something like an Ocellaris clownfish in Duluth, Minnesota, which is about as far as you can get from the tropics and saltwater, would be off limits to me. So interest groups like to push their own agendas. Our government is not very good about sniffing out common sense. That's the concern we have, that we all need to be more aware as Aquarists. If we like our hobby and we want other people to be able to keep and enjoy it, and I talk thinking about the benefits we bring. If we don't be more proactive, I mean, it will go away. That's a right that will be taken from us, or a privilege, however you want to look at it. But you look at reptile hobbyists have these same problems too. It's not unique to us. We have to fight for those rights and defend against BS with common sense and hope that it wins out. And I don't know that it always does. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to make the comment about you, hobbyists, when you mentor the young people coming into the hobby, stress the responsibility of not releasing non-native species into the wild. If you live along the coast, somebody dumped a couple of lionfish in somewhere along the line, and it's the issue now. The people that the rabid environmentalists are going to use that against hobbyists every chance they get. You don't think that in the United States it is illegal to keep a reef aquarium? It is in Hawaii. And it would be very easy for Florida to start tightening their resolution and make the coral reefs aquarium illegal there. So believe me, it can happen. It's already happened in Hawaii, and it can happen here too. And you're fooling yourself if you don't make it good.
You were talking about the lionfish. Is that a man-made screw-up, or is it been in the water forever, or is it predator removal?
It's a
natural predator.
Where they come from, I don't know if anybody pinpointed or even if they did any research about how they came in.
have some information.
Do you? Okay.
You go ahead.
No?
So they've done genetic studies, and they know that there are maybe 3 or 4 females responsible for all the lionfish that now exist in the Atlantic. 3 or 4 fish. Don't know how many males. It's just from the idiosyncrasies of the genetics that they can suss out. But we can really, anyone who wants to throw out the ballast water example and say, oh, they came in through the Panama Canal, it's absolute nonsense. This one had something to do with the aquarium trade. Whether it was a wholesaler or a collector who said, well, hey, I'll put them here so that I can have them here and collect them. I mean, we've seen purple tangs and maculosus angelfish, clownfish, you name it, batfish. People get ideas in their head and they're not always thinking straight or thinking about the long-term ramifications. They're thinking about themselves. This has something to do with the aquarium trade. Whether those fish were in a fish tank near the ocean and got washed in during a hurricane that's commonly thrown out there is what likely happened, because probably some aquarists said, yeah, I lived on the coast and my fish tank is gone and the lionfish that are in it are gone. Someone may have raised their hand and said, yeah, I might have done it. And you know, you can't really fault someone, but the other thought is that maybe this was done intentionally by someone. And you know, that's a real shame, but that's how someone can screw it up for everyone else and screw it up for the entire ecosystem. But yeah, 3 or 4 fish is probably all it took to start that. And they just found a favorable environment with no natural predators and an ability to prey on animals that don't recognize them as a threat to begin with. So because of those 2 factors, they've been able to make their inroads. Now, the interesting thing I saw recently was actually news out of the Gulf that the red snapper are now starting to eat them in great quantity. So that this is one of those things where in the long term, long term being maybe hundreds of years, they're not going to go away probably, but there will be a new balance that's struck. That's how nature works. That's how evolution works. Species make inroads into new environments and either don't succeed or succeed, and where we go from there is anyone's guess. It will be beyond our lifetimes, but they're probably here to stay. So, and we pay the price for that mistake or arrogance. So.
I've had a freshwater aquarium for a year and a half, and thinking about maybe starting with some saltwater. maybe in the near future. What are some recommendations for like where to start with size and fish and things like that, so I don't get overwhelmed and have to...
You get this question all the time, I'm sure.
There's really only two factors involved with that question, and it is space and budget. Space as big as you can put in, and budget depending on what you want to keep. Honestly, I think a coral tank, a reef tank, although it is more expensive on the outset, is actually easier to keep long term. I mean, corals in general in captivity seem to do quite well, most of them, given a modicum of responsible care, good lighting, good filtration, good water movement, and nutrition. We take care of those, and corals actually thrive and grow and are actually a great pleasure to keep. Fish, on the other hand, can be more tricky in general. There are more things that can go wrong with a fish-only tank than I think in a coral tank, honestly. Coral tanks, reef tanks are easy to keep. I think they're easy to keep. Anyway.
I'll put a plug in for our mentor program as well. So we've got reef experts in the club who will take you on and discuss your needs with you. Gary, that's basically the role you did with me at the Aquadome years ago when I was coming in. So
those are the considerations. You have to decide how big you want and what do you want to keep in, and then build around that.
I guess I would add just a little bit to that from the hobbyist experience looking back. I'm glad I started relatively small. There's the amount of time and or equipment and complexity that goes in as you scale up, it increases. So if you start with, and for me it felt like 75 gallons was a good sweet spot. If it's a relatively stable water volume, it's not going to shift dramatically with small mistakes, but it was completely manageable in terms of keeping it clean, getting water changes done.
I was at Aquatic Wildlife in the late 90s, and we were propagating fish and corals, and I've got to agree that corals can be much easier to keep once you hit that sweet spot with them and understand their requirements. I got to be honest, there are corals that I've never been able to keep. I've never had any success with them. So,
but don't you find that it's almost a personal experience? You can have your friend that does great with those coral, and you can't keep a single one. And there are some that you keep and they can't keep.
yeah, I'm basing this on the systems that we had.
Yeah.
We could never keep nobody. I mean, they went through several managers, and they just didn't bring the corals in anymore in these systems, and weren't able to keep them. So I don't think this was something that I was doing. It was germane to the system itself, and I was never able to pinpoint why we were not having success with certain species. Fishes, on the other hand, I'm not a fish person. I tended to focus on corals early on. A lot of my experience was with Bo Gregory's coming out of the Florida Keys back in the late 60s and early 60s. So I turned my attention toward the reef tanks early on. So I'll turn it over to maybe Matt's got some experience there.
So, what would you say, being a freshwater hobbyist, is one of the most basic rules for success? What do you follow?
Don't pollute the tank.
Okay, so don't pollute the tank. So, me being freshwater and saltwater, freshwater hobbyists have it easy because for the most part, you can just do a water change.
That's all I do.
Yeah, water change. And as long as you're good with your maintenance and your water changes, everything else kind of falls into line. Some of my most successful tanks were not necessarily big. They were manageable. They were things that I could do routine maintenance on regularly and not have it become a chore where I no longer wanted to do it or I'll put it off. One of my favorite reef tanks was a 12-gallon acrylic aquarium with a built-in filter back when I was much younger. And it didn't grow anything really fantastic, but it did a 1-gallon water change on it every week. It only held 6 gallons of water when you consider all the live rock and the coral and everything. It held 6 gallons of water. I was basically doing a 20% water change every week. have something small, one of the biggest things you can do to keep it going is just that regular routine water change. If you're changing 25% a week on a 25-gallon nano or a 20-gallon nanocube, really easy to do, it's not expensive. You should never have any problems ever. You probably don't even need to dose because you're just keeping up with that. So that is another way to approach it in the smaller systems to avoid things going out of whack, is to learn from what we all do as freshwater aquarists. Just have something that's manageable.
Except wanting to go bigger, that's always a problem.
So that's the thing, you always want to grow and grow. And some of my success with the harlequin filefish, being the first to breed a fish like that, that was done in Chicago. I had 3 25-gallon nanocubes, a 6-gallon nanocube, and 2 10-gallon tanks. I didn't even have 100 gallons of water running in total. It was very manageable, and now I have 2,000 gallons and 2 kids, and I'm going, I want 100 gallons again. So find something that fits within your time budget and your ability to maintain it and not lose interest, because that seems to be the long-term problem, is people have a little bit of problem, and it pushes them away from their tank. You're gonna have problems. You're new at it. You understand going into it. You're probably gonna crash a tank at some point. It's gonna happen. Dealing with captive bred animals and captive propagated corals, you don't have any guilt there. It's part of what's gonna happen. You're gonna learn through experience. You'll be a better aquarist for it. So just whatever you pick, make sure it's something that you can manage on a regular basis.
I can probably say for everybody on this panel that we've all killed fish. And it's not fun, and you never want to do it, and sometimes it breaks your heart, but it is what it is. I mean, if you beat yourself up over it and say, I'm out of this, you miss the enjoyment of the rest of it. It can be quite an enjoyment and a rewarding hobby. So everybody makes mistakes and everybody kills fish, and I've killed thousands. I've been doing this 40 years. 40 years I've been selling fish. I've killed thousands of fish. But there's always that other side of it. That there's that cool fish that you get there, that coral that comes in and the color is so, you're going, wow. Or you just see one in a picture and you go, maybe I wish I had one of those. So there's always something over the horizon to do with this. And it's fun. And I've been doing it a long, long time. And, still do it. So. But don't, like I say, don't beat yourself up if you lose a fish, because that happens.
Guys, we are hitting right at the end of our time limit, but everyone who came, we want to first thank you for taking the time and coming out to our second Capital City Coral Corral. We want to thank Emily and Bud for emceeing. They did a fantastic job. Most importantly, I have to thank our staff and volunteers. Without them, this would not have happened. And without you as a club and members, it most definitely would not have happened. When I took over the club, I did it with the idea that maybe someday we could grow to this and continue growing. And to see so many of you take your time and come out and show this interest and show the devotion to the hobby, to me, it makes all the work that I've done worthwhile. So thank you. And these guys, I mean, wow, we had a great lineup the first year, and I was hard-pressed to find a lineup. Everyone was like, wow. And I think we easily matched last year. So let's take it. I can look across and I can see 4 guys that I'm definitely interested in having back at events in future years. So thank you, everyone. I do want to take a moment now, and as was mentioned earlier, the Austin Reef Club this year decided that we were going to start offering scholarships to local high school students, specifically students who are going on to major in marine studies and marine-related fields in college. It's our goal to help the next generation of marine biologists and scientists get a foothold and get that education so that they can continue to do what Dane and what Matt and
even what Paul and Gary have done for years, which is kind of figure out the facts and the science behind this to make it successful, and with every fish that dies, hopefully we learn how to keep the next one alive, and to help them reproduce so that we can make this a sustainable hobby, and to provide the art. So with that, we decided to do the scholarship, and the scholarship is paid for with membership dues. It originally started with me and my idea of how do I give back to the club members. And as our sponsors found out about it, they all started saying, hey, we want to give back. And so the donations of our aquariums today from River City Aquatics and from the Aquadome, all of the proceeds of those ticket sales go right back into the scholarship fund to make sure we can keep it going for years. So, you know, it's one guy having an idea and a bunch of other guys stepping up and saying, hey, how can we help and make this grow? And you guys buying the tickets to help fund it. So thank you for that. Sadly, as we decided to do this scholarship, we lost one of our members. And, I didn't know Tim Huynh very well, but I knew him and I had seen him at River City and worked with him, and he'd helped me numerous times. And I didn't know, as the guy who runs the club, how much he did in the club. And everyone knew him, and when we heard of his loss, the outpouring of sympathy was amazing. And is Ty still here?
Yeah, to go Santa Fe.
Okay, so Ty knew Tim well, and took it upon himself to start raising a collection to help Tim's family. And at last count, within about 3 days, our members raised almost $1,000 for his family. That wasn't me. That was you, and that was you cluing me into what our family needed, and that's how I view it. And so when we decided to do the scholarship, and when we learned of Tim's loss, there was nothing to do but to look at the contribution and the relationships and the friends and the ideals that he embodied in his hobby. And it was a no-brainer. About the time the idea crossed my mind, minutes later, I've got message after message after message coming in saying, have you thought about naming the scholarship after Tim? And there wasn't a second thought at that point. So I didn't read a thing I wrote down. I spoke from my heart, and you guys spoke from your heart. And we will miss Tim, and we will remember Tim. And we have 2 recipients here tonight of our first 2 scholarships. We were able to increase the amounts by donations from our sponsors and from the tickets that you purchased. And we did a great job today, and we have enough money to make sure that this continues for years to come. And we will continue to do events to make sure. So I would like to invite, we are lucky enough to have some of Tim's family who came in today to present these awards for us. So would you like to please join us on stage? I would like to say, Matt was kind enough to bring several issues of the recent Corral magazines that they have worked. And then we also have our awards. We will be giving $350 to each recipient. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Hi, my name is Thomas Huynh. My brother was Timothy Huynh. My little brother, Tyler, and my girlfriend, Caroline. I would just like to thank everybody from the ARC for what they have done very much. I'd like to present Nicholas Diaz. Nicholas will graduate in July 2014 and has been accepted to Texas A&M University at Galveston. Where he will study marine biology. He's currently maintains a 65-gallon mixed reef and not busy with school or working at the City of Huynh. Our second recipient is Julia Small, and she will graduate in June 2014. She has been accepted to the University of Texas at Austin's College of Natural Sciences, where she plans to double major in marine biology and business. Wow. This hobby began with her first trip to SeaWorld as a toddler and has since morphed into appreciation of all things related to our oceans. She is a surfer and considers the water her second home.
So guys, thank you. We will be wrapping here and clearing out, but we still